Your writing will dramatically improve when you start focusing on what your characters perceive rather than on what they observe. At first, observation, these two things might seem like the same thing. In fact, you can go onto any political discussion anywhere on the internet and you'll see plenty of people mistaking perception for observation. But there are many differences between observations and perceptions, and these differences can truly improve your writing, especially with the individual viewpoints of your characters. Focusing on perception will make your viewpoints more distinct. It will help you to characterize your characters, and it will enhance the emotional impact of your writing. If your writing feels flat, if the characters don't seem engaging, it could very well be that you are focusing too much on observation, and this video will help you to move your writing towards perception. Let's start by defining these two terms, as they are related but very different. Observation is simply the means of taking in some piece of sensory information. It is an objective assessment of a situation. The walls are white, the floors are hardwood covered in dust, the ceiling fan is spinning at 75 RPM, the temperature in the room is 24.4 degrees Celsius. Those are all observation. Perception is related to observation and is essentially the information that is added to an observation by the observer themselves. This is the crucial difference. Perception is how your characters color the world they see. It is the collection of judgments and feelings and emotions that they add onto what they are observing. They see the dust on the floors and they perceive that no one has been in the room in a while. If two characters observe the same thing, they are likely to have different perceptions because they are different characters. They're going to have different thoughts and feelings about the things that they're observing. I was in a conference room in a meeting once and it was snowing outside, and there was someone in the meeting who was visiting from a place where they don't get snow very often, and he looked out the window and was like, "Man, that's beautiful." And I looked out the window as someone who has lived their entire life in a place where it snows quite a bit and was like, I'm going to have to shovel later, aren't I? You have two different people observing the same thing, the fact that it was snowing outside, and those two people have very different perceptions of that thing because of the information and the feelings that they apply to that observation. Observation alone leads to boring writing because most of the information that the reader actually wants to get at is contained in the perception, not the observations. For every one of your characters, you need to think about how they will perceive events around them and what this perception will tell the reader. One major element of perception is expectations. Every time your character encounters a situation, they are going to have some kind of expectation about that situation, which is going to affect their perception. Let's say that you meet with your boss and they say that you're getting a 5% raise. What determines whether that's good or not? If you were expecting a 10% raise, then 5% is going to suck. If you were expecting a 2% raise, then 5% is great. If you were expecting to be fired, then 5% is amazing. The perception of that event is going to change based on the expectations you have going into it. As your characters work through the plot to accomplish their goals, they are naturally going to have expectations about how things are going to play out. You need to make sure you understand what those expectations are and whether the characters' actions violate those expectations, because that's going to drive their perception of events. If you want to make your characters miserable, give them a bunch of expectations and then have those expectations not be met. Works every time. Closely tied to expectations is comparison. The ways that we often describe things, cold, hot, short, tall, wide, narrow, subscribed, not subscribed, are all fundamentally based around comparison. And this is one of the major differences between observation and perception. It's that perception is often based on a comparison. Something is only hot in relation to something being cold. 30 degrees Celsius is a hot day, but a very cold cup of tea. 6 foot 2 inches tall is short if you play in the NBA. When we observe something, our perception often compares that thing to other things. Your characters are going to be comparing situations to their preferences, to other characters, or to past events. Them making judgments about whether something is good or bad often come back to comparison. Another important element of perception is emotional attachment, which I ran out of room to write because I wasn't expecting it to take up that much room. It's a lot longer in comparison to the other words that I've put on this page so far. If a vase of flowers gets knocked off a table and shatters on the floor, how that event affects a character depends in part on their emotional attachment to that vase. If the vase was a priceless family heirloom handed down to them from their grandmother, then it's a tragedy. If it was a $10 thing that they got at Walmart, then the event of it getting smashed on the floor is a minor annoyance. These emotional attachments of your characters are crucial for the story. They are what separates a manifest of dry events from a good piece of fiction. They build out connections between the world of your story and your characters. And they really work to breathe life into your characters because it gives them things that they care about. It gives them a past that affects how they perceive events in the present. Every event in your character's life is going to shape how they respond emotionally. All the bad experiences, all the good experiences, these create a set of beliefs that fundamentally alter the character's perception. Now we're getting to the most important element of perception, and that is reactions and responses. How your character perceives the world is going to shape that world, because perception fundamentally affects how they react and respond to the events that happen around them. This response creates an action which affects change in the world, which creates a ripple effect across the story. Does the character yell at the dolt who knocked the vase off the table, or do they tell them that it's okay? How does the character that knocked the vase off the table respond? Are they contrite, or do they get mad or defensive? Perception colors events. That coloring moves a character towards specific responses. That response creates action. Those actions are fundamentally your plot. If what your character does is driven by their perception of events and all the baggage that comes along with that perception, then you will have a story that feels more natural. Your characters will seem more like real people rather than pawns set to carry out the plot you've given them. You always need to think about how this specific character will perceive different situations, whether you're plotting out your novel beforehand or if you're pantsing your way through it. Always get specific about expectations, comparisons, and the emotions the character carries with them. We talk a lot about character voice, but it's often done from the perspective of just how the character speaks or the words that they use, that kind of thing. When character voice, where it really matters, is things like perception, how they view the world, how their expectations, comparisons, emotions, how all of these things color the world around them, and how it drives their action. That's how you get to a real deep character voice. Focusing on perception will improve your writing because this is all the juicy stuff about your characters that readers want to know. Well-developed characters will have well-developed perception. The video is almost over now, which, depending on your perception, may be a good or bad thing. So there you have it. I hope you enjoyed this video and found the advice in it useful. If you want to see more stuff like this, you can check out all my other writing advice related videos and subscribe to my channel. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.